Peter Credlin, live on Sky News Australia.
Good evening and welcome to the show. I'm Caroline Marcus, filling in for Peter Credlin. Let's take a look at tonight's top stories. Here's what's coming up on the program. Queenslanders brace for more wild weather as thousands are left without power from unprecedented storms. We'll have a live update from the southeast region shortly. Also tonight, a significant cyber attack on an iconic brand in Australia. Plus, a new proposal that could see households face hefty fees as the war on gas continues. Those details a little later. But first, on the deaths of these two Australian brothers, Ali and Ibrahim Bazi, who were killed alongside Ibrahim's wife, Shuruk Hamoud, by an Israeli airstrike in South Lebanon. Yesterday, I was contacted by the imam of a mosque in South Sydney, in the area where the younger brother Ibrahim was from. This same mosque, Al Rahman in Kingsgrove, has controversially been holding commemoration services for foreign Hezbollah fighters right here in Australia since the terror group began attacking Israel in October, including, as we revealed on the show on Tuesday, one for Hussein Ibrahim Salameh, a Hezbollah terrorist from Lebanon, being planned for tonight, the memorial service tonight here in Sydney. The Imam, Sheikh Youssef Naba, alerted me yesterday to Ibrahim Bazi and his wife's death hours before the news had broken, claiming he had been killed when Israel bombed a civilian's house, a claim the mosque repeated on its Facebook page sometime later, saying Mr. Bazi had gone to Lebanon to bring his bride to be with him back in Australia. Now, Australian authorities at that stage could not confirm the claims that we were told. The Imam refused to put us in touch with the man's family and declined an invitation to come on the program himself, saying our community doesn't trust Sky News, but still imploring us to criticise politicians for their silence on the issue. Well, not long after that, ABC News ran an interview online with the family repeating these claims, a story that was faithfully picked up by some other media outlets. The impression these created was that this was an innocent family targeted by a cruel and indiscriminate Israeli Defense Force. But within a matter of hours, a very different picture emerged. Hezbollah, a proscribed terror organisation in Australia, had announced the older Ali Bazi was one of their own fighters and claimed he was martyred while on duty. The caskets of both the brothers and the bride were draped in the Hezbollah flag during a military-type funeral. A senior medic told Middle East news service The National it seemed that Ali Bazi had been targeted in the attack. Today, the Attorney General Mark Dreyfus fronted the media.
We are aware of the announcement made by Hezbollah claiming links to one of the Australians killed. We are seeking to establish the facts. However, Hezbollah is a listed terrorist organisation under Australian law.
It's a nothing response. No real clarity from a government that has either lost track of at least one of its own citizens, who by all accounts so far appears to have become so radicalised that he was fighting for a terror group overseas. Or it's a government that's withholding what they really know about this family. Instead, the Attorney General took a swipe at the former government.
Our government dealt with the regrettably unconstitutional laws that were passed by the former government that provided for the stripping of citizenship in certain circumstances.
Well, here, Mr. Dreyfus is referring to a High Court ruling that it's unconstitutional to continue to detain convicted Algerian terrorist Abdul Nasser Benbrika after then Home Affairs Minister Peter Dutton cancelled his Australian citizenship 3 years ago in an attempt to keep him in prison. He had been deemed still a terrorist when his sentence had finished. Mr. Dreyfus has been incredibly testy about the recent overturning of another law by the High Court that saw 148 criminals released from indefinite detention, only for 3 of them to be rearrested on fresh charges shortly after.
I will not be apologising for upholding the law. I will not be apologising for pursuing the rule of law, and I will not be apologising for acting. Do not interrupt.
Well, he later did apologise to our reporter who he snapped at, who was only asking a reasonable question. On the latest matter, we put more reasonable questions we believe viewers deserve answers to the relevant government departments. Were these Australian brothers born here in Australia? If not, how did they get their citizenship? How was Ibrahim Bazi's wife able to get a visa if her brother-in-law had links to Hezbollah? Were either of the brothers or other family members on an ASIO watch list? As yet, we've received no response. So yes, Sheikh, I will criticise the silence of politicians over this, but probably not how you'd like me to. I'll criticise the lack of clarity about a Sydney man who appears to have left the country years ago, radicalised enough to fight for a brutal foreign terror group. Hezbollah is a Shiite militia group based in Lebanon and backed by Iran. It's inserted itself into Israel's war with Hamas when it began firing rockets into the Jewish state the day after the October 7 massacre, seeking to distract Israel from its war with the other terrorists on her border. There have been daily military activities in southern Lebanon, including airstrikes, rockets and missile fire. Australia has had a clear warning against travelling to the area since mid-October, yet somehow Ibrahim Bazi was able to go there. Shadow Home Affairs Minister James Patterson raised an important point this afternoon.
It's normal practice for the Australian government to seek to prevent people from departing the country if they know that they are going to fight with the terrorist organisation. We don't know what our intelligence and security agencies knew and when they knew it, but I think it is important once the government has established the facts here that they are upfront and honest about this and they disclose that to the public in an appropriate way.
We will be making sure we keep the pressure on the government to get those disclosures. And joining me now is Nick Cater, Senior Fellow at the Menzies Research Centre. Nick, thank you for your time. As I mentioned there in my editorial, more details are emerging about these 2 Australian brothers killed in southern Lebanon. Now, one of them has been announced by Hezbollah as one of its fighters. These are concerning revelations, aren't they?
Very concerning, Caroline. Look, I mean, regardless of the Hezbollah claim that this was one of their fighters and the draping of the coffin in the Hezbollah flag, which I would have thought is pretty slam dunk proof, really. Regardless of that, nobody goes to southern Lebanon to sightsee these days, if they ever did. And it's deeply concerning that you had people like this who are so far off the radar, apparently, that the government wasn't aware of them and couldn't stop them leaving the country. Hundreds of thousands of law-abiding Australian citizens were prevented from leaving the country because of COVID, and we can't stop this. But I tell you what, Caroline, I think it's a real wake-up call for those useful idiots, those fellow travellers who've been joining these Palestinian demonstrations around the country, university students, left-wingers, climate change activists of various kinds. Just bear in mind that the people you are standing next to who are chanting death to the Jews and who are chanting from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, they actually mean that. And they are prepared, some of them at least, to go to Lebanon to fight for that cause, to fight to wipe Israel off the map. Deeply concerning, as you say.
Yes, deeply, and it just goes to show that these aren't empty threats some of the times that we hear on the streets. It can turn into real actions. Look, moving on to something else today, iconic probiotic brand Yakult, a childhood favourite of mine, has confirmed it has been hit by a significant cyber attack that has seen sensitive employee documents published on the dark web. Seriously, is nothing safe anymore, Nick? This just comes a week after the St Vincent's Health Network was hacked. These attacks show no signs of stopping, do they?
Yeah, there was obviously a culture of laziness to security or something going on in Yakult. But look, I mean, you want to joke about this. I mean, you wonder what use that data would be. But it is of use, of course, because they've stolen, as I understand it, employees' records, passport numbers, driver's licenses, those kind of things, which can be used, of course, for criminal purposes. And it just goes to show that every company, in fact, all of us individually, need to be a lot more conscious of the need to be careful with our data online and aware that whatever we put online could essentially be public information. So, yeah, it's another warning.
And I guess makes these companies susceptible to attempts to blackmail as well. Let's move on to this interesting survey that's come out today. Penny Wong has topped a list of the most popular federal politicians, according to an exclusive survey by the Sydney Morning Herald. And Tasmanian Senator Jackie Lambie came in second, with Jacinta Price third. The survey also revealed the least favourite politicians. Scott Morrison on the top with a likeability score of -35. Ouch. Lydia Thorpe a close second on -29. Nick, what do you make of these results? Does Penny Wong deserve the top spot?
Well, not in my humble view. And I mean, there's only one person. I mean, there's a standout winner, obviously, and that should have been Jacinta Price. And look, she got in at third. I think she is the only coalition politician in the top 10, which has to tell you something about the standard of the polling and the reliability of it. I mean, let's face it. There was a poll on October the 14th in this country where people voted on the cause for which Jacinta Price had been arguing. And it won by 60-40. So I don't really think that this is an accurate poll at all. And Scott Morrison, I think, look, OK, it's very fashionable and, you know, for people on the left, even people on the right, to beat up on Scott Morrison. But he's achieved more in his political career than Anthony Albanese ever will, because he signed the AUKUS agreement, which gave us nuclear submarines. That is his greatest legacy, and it should never be forgotten, however he appears in these questionable opinion polls.
Yeah, I can't say I think we'd get the same results if we did a Sky News survey here. But finally, Nick, I want to talk about a great piece you wrote this week about the year of the influencer, as Taylor Swift is the first entertainer to be nominated as Time Magazine's Person of the Year. Tell us about this. Why is 2023 the year of the influencer?
Look, 97 years they've been awarding this Person of the Year for the person who has most influence on the world during that year. And it's the first time they've chosen an entertainer. And I'm thinking, you what? I mean, there's so much serious things going on in the world. You know, the world is probably in a more dangerous position than it's been in the last, well, certainly in my lifetime. And yet, so we can't find somebody of the calibre of, say, Winston Churchill or Roosevelt, you know, as our leader. That's a little bit worrying that it's Taylor Swift. And I'm not so sure about, I mean, I may be biased, I may be showing my age here, but, you know, she's certainly an accomplished musician and she's enormously popular and all that. But I very much doubt that she'll have the longevity of somebody like, say, even Carole King, or she certainly wasn't a songwriter like Stephen Sondheim or you know, Leonard Bernstein, who wrote West Side Story. Those people's work endures, and I honestly don't think she even comes close as an artist to those standards. But look, I'll wait for the hate mail.
Well, all those Swifties who spent hours refreshing their internet page trying to get tickets to her shows here might disagree with you. But look, Nick Cater, thank you. I'm nominating you for Time's Person of the Year next year. Thanks for your time. Let's turn to the developing weather emergency in southeast Queensland now, where more than 40,000 people are tonight left without power as the region braces for an oncoming heat wave. It comes after unprecedented Christmas Day storms battered the southeast, killing a total of 7 people, including a 9-year-old girl. For an update on the situation, I am joined by Greg Christensen, Mayor of the Scenic Rim region, just inland from the Gold Coast. Greg, thank you for your time tonight. Take us through what the community is facing.
Good afternoon, Caroline. The community's facing the biggest disaster this region has seen. The original event on Christmas night affected more than 75% of the region's population. And still at the moment, something like 40% of our region don't have power back and aren't likely in the foreseeable future to have it back. So that's something like 7,000 homes for us. We've got more than that don't have phone and internet coverage because the relay towers lost power supply as well, and Telstra having trouble getting power back to them all so that we can get that coverage, which makes it hard to then be communicating with the community. And there's a lot of questions as the days go on and the heat wave kicks in. The most affected areas for our region are in the east of the region around Tamborine and the Tamborine Mountain Precinct, which I'm sure are well known as in the Gold Coast hinterland. And because of the lack of power, this is a precinct where people rely on power to get their water to their house, for drinking and for showers and for sanitation, as well as power to operate their on-site sullage system to pump it out and so forth. So there's double whammy in that for people with health issues as well as access to water. Whilst there are some people with local generators supporting their neighbours, we still have a lot of people that we're now mobilising drinking water supply for. We're in the process of trying then to set up some other facilities for those people. At present, this has been so demanding on resource, we haven't yet been able to start the scoping of the impact on our business sector, but it will be large. Obviously, this is a time of year where our tourism operators are expecting high turnovers, and many of those, certainly in the east, just aren't able to operate at the moment. They don't have power, they don't have access, they can't get their staff access, their staff are not contactable because their power is out and they're home looking after their family.
And there's more intense storms predicted over this New Year's Eve weekend, and what preparations are underway for that?
So the most important preparations at the moment is that we're pushing ahead with the focus on safe access and securing the compromised houses. There's so many power lines down. We need to go street by street with Energex, checking that the power is safe on the cables on the ground so that our crews can clear the road and then SES can get access to houses so that we can get tarpaulins in place before more rain comes over the weekend with these forecast events. That's our first priority. And of course, the second is supporting our community to prepare for this. And that's why we're working to set up some auxiliary facilities to give them better access to information and resources so that they're able to respond under what are incredibly trying circumstances.
Greg Christensen, thank you for your time. We're thinking of all of you up there. Hope your residents stay as safe as they can be. Now let's move on to our panel tonight. Social media giant TikTok seems to be in hot water as Australia's privacy watchdog launches an inquiry into the Chinese-owned app. The probe will determine whether TikTok is harvesting the data of Australians without their consent. The Labor government says it's concerned, but trusts the Commission to do its job.
We've shown how seriously we take breaches of Australians' privacy, at the same time legislated to give additional powers to the Privacy Commissioner. I expect that the Privacy Commissioner will be using those additional powers in this investigation.
Let's bring in the panel to discuss this. Joining me now is former Liberal MP Nicole Flint and current Liberal MP Garth Hamilton. Welcome to you both. Nicole, TikTok is already on thin ice, but these latest privacy revelations are troubling.
Oh, they're super troubling, Caroline. I thought that you could protect yourself by just making sure you didn't have TikTok on your phone. I've never had it. I never will have it. But now it turns out that even if you don't have TikTok yourself, if you haven't installed it, they can still access your data and use it. I think this is appalling. I think the government needs to act very, very quickly to protect Australians. And we need to see financial implications for the likes of TikTok as well. Big tech, whoever they are, need to learn their lesson. And there are a lot of jurisdictions in Europe, for example, who have big penalties when companies like this do the wrong thing. And that's what we need to start to see in Australia as well.
Look, Nicole, I'm with you. I don't have the app on my phone either, but now I'm concerned people sending me links and I open it to watch a video on TikTok here and there. Could my data be compromised? Garth, is Nicole right? Can the Labor government be doing more to protect us?
Look, as usual, Nicole is right, and I join both of you in not having TikTok on my phone. I'm not cool enough or young enough for that. But look, we're clearly playing catch-up here. And if we want to bring ourselves in line with other nations who do have stronger protections for their people's data online, it's really a question of how much this government wants to stand up to the Chinese government. Now, we've talked a big game about normalising and improving relations here, but let's have a look. We've got what is effectively a Chinese state-owned company aggressively harvesting the data of Australian citizens. I don't think that sounds like a good relationship at all. I think that's a terrible relationship. We know that when it came to the issue of the naval divers, our Prime Minister didn't really have it in him to stand up to China then. I doubt he has it in him to stand up to China on this issue either.
All over a platform where people just do silly dancing videos. But look, let's move on to something else. Victoria's war on gas continues, with details emerging today that households now face an almost $2,400 upfront cost to connect to the gas network from 2025. If you're a business, you could be slugged with an almost $31,000 fee. Nicole, this is all a push to wean the state off gas, but what do you make of this latest proposal?
Oh, look, we've got the Victorian Labor government again interfering in people's lives and telling them what to do. They are taking away people's choice and they are greatly increasing the cost on consumers. You know, this will probably hit lower income households the most because they may not be able to afford to transition away from gas. But what is hugely concerning is the impact it's going to have on the hospitality sector. Commercial kitchens rely on gas. I mean, how on earth are they going to be able to afford to cook a schnitzel, for example? This is absolutely ridiculous. And I think the other thing that a lot of people are becoming aware of now, Caroline, is that getting rid of gas just pushes people onto electricity. Now, Labor want all of that electricity, excuse me, to come from renewables. Now, are renewables really going to save the environment like the Labor Party at the state and federal level claims that they will? We have not properly assessed, I don't think, the full environmental and lifelong impact of decommissioning solar panels, of decommissioning wind farms, and of putting these enormous electricity transmission lines through some prime farming land. I don't think that forcing everyone onto electricity that's supported by solar panels and by wind turbines is actually saving the environment as Labor would have us believe, which is apparently their argument as to why we need to get rid of gas.
And what happens when the sun doesn't shine and the wind doesn't blow? But Nicole, God forbid that our pub schnitzel is going to be affected. Not anything but the schnitty. Garth, I can't imagine that residents and business owners will be happy about this. Should the government stay out of their lives?
Not only should they stay out of people's lives, I think I'll always take the opportunity to advance that position. But goodness me, this is what happens when a Labor government gets involved in the economy and starts to make ideological positions. What they've done here is force off an option from the table. We know that markets make their best decisions when they have the most options. Labor's reducing those options. This is a ridiculous position for us to take, pushing gas off the table when Australia has plentiful supplies of it. So, quick prediction, I think anyone who's out there hoping for their energy prices to go down, you're going to be disappointed. Things are going to continue to go up with decisions like this.
I think that's a pretty safe prediction from everything we've seen. Now, on to another push by the Albanese government to get more nurses into aged care homes. Now, that's been labelled a farce, with the sector spending more on short-term contract workers, threatening their viability. Garth, the aged care sector seems to still be a mess. Providers are relying on expensive agency workers now. How can this be fixed?
Well, not easily. is the answer, particularly in the light of the IR legislation that this government has forced upon small businesses, including the aged care sector across Australia. And it's almost farcical, this situation here. We've got IR legislation that demonises casual workers, but then Labor government has forced the aged care sector to rely upon casual workers. What's going to happen, of course, is that those workers will be moved on to permanent contracts. Prices will go up. In a time of inflation, we will see the costs of aged care continue to go up. And that's having an impact. We've already seen in the last 12 months, 40 facilities being forced to close down. When you increase the cost of something, there is an impact. Someone has to pay that. And unfortunately, the people who are paying it are quite vulnerable. Labor have taken a very bad situation and they've made it much, much worse with heavy-handed and ill-thought-through intervention.
Nicole Flint, Garth Hamilton, thank you both so much for your time. Coming up, the reality of Labor's rushed industrial relation reforms. Plus, we'll be live with Israel's former Justice Minister. Welcome back. A major industry group has accused the Albanese government of launching a squalid attack on employers via a proposed shake-up of laws dictating who should pick up the bill in sexual harassment and discrimination cases. And a hint, it's not the person making the claim, even if it fails. Joining me to discuss this is Innes Willox, Chief Executive of the Australian Industry Group. Innes, thank you so much for joining us tonight. You accuse the Attorney General of making a cheap and nasty political point to seek favour with a few union leaders. Why do you say that?
Good evening, Caroline. Look, this has been years in the making, this legislation, what's known as the Respect at Work proposals, 55 different proposals that employers, union representatives, government representatives, community groups have all worked through to try to strike a balance here. And one key point of the work that was done by the former Sex Discrimination Commissioner, Kate Jenkins, was to make sure there was clear cost neutrality here. That is that those who brought forward a claim bore the cost of making that claim. Now, what's happened here now is that the Attorney General, for reasons unknown to anyone who is involved in these consultations or discussions over the past few years, has decided it would be a good idea that employers should pick up the tab, even if a claim is not successful made by an employee. Now, what does that do? That creates a circumstance where people are encouraged to make claims. It provides an opportunity for lawyers to encourage people to make claims, knowing that their costs are going to be paid, and no doubt they'll pad those costs out too. And it means that an employer, again, is bearing the cost of what can be a completely erroneous claim, a claim that is found to have no provenance at all. But still the employer pays. So what does that do also? It creates distrust, disharmony within the workplace, and it makes it harder for people to get employed because it makes employers more suspicious of who they're employing. We really just ask the Attorney General to stop playing to his union mates and to his Labor lawyer friends and to really see some common sense here, go back to what the original proposal was, and then employers will continue to collaborate in implementing what are really quite important laws. They're too important to be sort of made victims of cheap political point scoring to cosy up to a few mates.
Well, I mean, I get the sort of principle behind it of trying to encourage genuine victims not to be put off by potential financial costs, but just seems to promote just a more litigious workplace here. But look, Innes, you've also written today that Labor's IR reforms will only hurt the government's productivity drive next year. Take us through that.
Well, Caroline, the government is trying to do some important things around productivity, around skills, education and training. For instance, thinking about how the workforce needs to be skilled for the future. A lot of work being done in education, really important long-term work, which is going to be completely undermined by what the government is now looking to do in the industrial relations landscape. There are a whole range of proposals that are still before the Senate. There was some rush through the Parliament on December the 6th this year when Parliament was just about to conclude around labour hire. But there's a whole lot more around casuals, around contracting, around the gig economy, around definitions of employees, and even around enterprise bargaining, which make it impossible for an employer to win a dispute with a union or an employee when it comes to enterprise bargaining. So there's a lot of important work to be done here. None of this has any impact positively on productivity, which everyone from the Reserve Bank governor down, even the Treasurer, has made the point that we need to get more productivity into our economy. That means working smarter. None of this provides any productivity benefit at all. In fact, it detracts from productivity. And that's our big concern going into a year, Caroline, where our economy is expected to slow and we'll hit some pretty tough and choppy waters. We need to have as much going for us as possible. And these IR laws as they stand and what's gone through already are really going to drive us backward, make it harder for people to be employed, make it harder for businesses to invest, and make it harder for Australians to become more productive and more competitive.
Yeah, and they've been labelled draconian by the opposition as well. Ines Willocks, thank you so much for your time tonight. Now joining me from Tel Aviv is Israel's former Justice Minister, Ayelet Shaked. Ayelet, thank you for joining us. We're seeing reports that Israel and Hamas have reacted coolly to this Egyptian proposal to end the war, which entails a phased hostage release and the formation of a mixed Palestinian government to administer both Gaza and the West Bank. Do you think Israel could ever accept such a deal, and should they?
We have two goals. One is to bring back our hostages. You know that we have still 2 babies in captivity. We have young women in captivity. And as now the world knows they raped brutally our women before they murdered them in the music festival. So we need to get out the young women as soon as possible. We have elderly people in captivity, and we are doing all the effort we can in order to release them. And the second goal is to eliminate Hamas. Now, we are in negotiation with the Egyptians, and they are talking to the Hamas leadership. By the way, from our perspective, the Hamas leadership should surrender or die. They are all dead men walking after what they did after the massacre. So there are negotiations. It is not there yet, but Israel needs to achieve those 2 goals.
Well, I guess any proposal that would see Hamas have any role in a future Palestinian government probably wouldn't be seriously considered by Israel then, in light of those goals. Ayelet, I wanted to ask you about one of the top stories we've been reporting here today. It's about the death of 2 Australian brothers who were killed in an airstrike in southern Lebanon. It's been confirmed it was an Israeli airstrike. The government has been unable to confirm, though, whether one of the brothers is a Hezbollah fighter, but the terror group has claimed that is the case and held a funeral for him with Hezbollah flags over all the coffins. Are you able to shed any light about what Israel may know about this particular story and why Israel is carrying out airstrikes in that region in the first place?
Israel is doing strike on this area because it's an area of Hezbollah components and activity. Now, the Hezbollah start a war in the north. They shoot missiles on our towns. You know that we evacuate our citizens from the northern border. So, you know, we are just trying to push the Hezbollah from our border. You know that there is the UN decision 1701 that the Hezbollah should not be there. They need to be in the north of the Litani River. And either the international community will enforce this decision or we will have to take care of that. Currently, the Hezbollah start a war in the north. They bomb our cities and we are fighting back. Caroline, imagine to yourself that, for example, Perth, you know, a terror organization would shoot missiles on Perth and you will need to evacuate all the people from Perth to Melbourne, and then you need to fight back. So this is what we are doing. We evacuate our citizens. And it's the first time, by the way, that in such, you know, a big quantity of civilians, Israeli civilians, had to leave their homes, and we are fighting back the Hezbollah. Those people were in an area of Hezbollah, and probably one of them was also a terrorist.
Yeah, that seems to be at least what we're hearing from Hezbollah is the case. They've claimed it. I'll just ask you quickly more on Hezbollah. Israel has warned the head of that group, Hassan Nasrallah, that he is next. And we're hearing reports senior US officials have been urging Israel to avoid further escalation of the conflict with Lebanon. What do you think we can expect? Will this turn into a new full-blown war?
It's really depends on the international community. If the US, France, if the international community will enforce the UN decision 1701, and it says that the Hezbollah should not be on our border, then, it's the best solution. We don't want to start a war there. But if the Hezbollah will still sit on our border, we will have to take care of that. So actually right now, it's in the hands of the international community. We can't accept anymore after the massacre in the south. We can't let it happen again in the north. So, we need to find a way how to push the Hezbollah up north.
No, I don't have too much faith in the United Nations given how it's treated Israel in past resolutions. But Ayelet Shaked, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your insight into this. Now, after the break, Trump wins his court battle with Michigan, plus why a transgender actress was almost kicked out of an airport. That's next. Well, yesterday I exclusively revealed on the program that RMIT professor Andrew Timming had been sacked days out from Christmas, allegedly over his input into an online spat between controversial internet personality Andrew Tate and climate activist Greta Thunberg. Greta had tweeted this to Andrew Tate after he targeted her in a boast about his emissions. In response, Professor Timming posted this. He's now set to take the university to the Fair Work Commission. Joining me now to discuss is Hobart City Councillor Louise Elliott and Sky News contributor Kosha Garda. Thank you both for your time. Louise, I understand you met Professor Timming recently at the Free Speech Union of Australia launch. What do you make of all of this?
Yes, I did. I was fortunate enough to meet Professor Timming. He was one of several academics at the Free Speech Union launch, academics who believe in the necessity of free speech. And it's an absolutely disturbing situation, but it's not surprising in this environment. Everyone reading that speech, that tweet by Professor Timming can see that he did nothing wrong. He commented on some pretty obvious double standards around sexism, and it's a really disturbing situation. Universities are meant to be a home ground for free speech. That's how we challenge ideas and concepts and innovate, and that should really be at home in university setting. So I applaud Professor Timming for standing up to this, and I understand he has a petition out there to the Vice-Chancellor of RMIT, and I wish him all the best and hope that we can keep pushing back on this insanity because Professor Timming did absolutely nothing wrong.
Well, Kosha, Professor Timming has accused academia broadly, both here in Australia and overseas in places like the US, of possessing a bias, an inherent bias against conservatives. Would you agree with that?
I think the data for that, Caroline, is undeniably true. Leaving aside the specifics of this case, which is being adjudicated, there are organizations out there like FIRE in the US, that freedom of individual rights and expression, I believe, where they document across the university landscape in the US specifically what types of infringements have happened upon personal rights and civil liberties, from professors being sanctioned and fired, from students' admissions being rescinded after admissions departments look at tweets that they may have said in their past when they were as young as 14, 15 years old in school, as far as speakers that have been disinvited. And then also you could look at political donations of faculty members in academia at something like 98% towards the left of the aisle and only 2% towards the right. You put all that together, along with the fact that there really is a power imbalance in academia, especially if you're a student. You'll do anything to get into some of these universities and get good grades and curry favor from your professors, that most people sort of keep their mouths shut. And I think you put all that together and then in a way, it's sad, but it's not a surprise that we've ended up here.
Yeah, and as I pointed out on the show last night, the irony is that they only seem to protect free speech at some of these top US universities when it comes to things like people calling for the genocide of Jews on campus, but there you have it. Still on the US, Donald Trump has scored a victory in his fight against challenges to his eligibility to run for the White House next year. Michigan's Supreme Court has declined to hear a case by voters seeking to disqualify him from the state's primary ballot. Kosher, first Colorado, now Michigan. Is this going to happen in every state?
That seems to be the plan for sure. I think certainly the left-leaning states and the swing states, which Michigan is for sure. It was interesting here where the Michigan Supreme Court rejected the argument, or they say that their laws in Michigan suggested that the Secretary of State does not have standing to remove a federal candidate off the ballot, whereas the Colorado Supreme Court said otherwise. In each of those cases, though, it's going to make its way up to the Supreme Court. Most legal scholars agree with the version of the Michigan law that there is just no provision in the United States Constitution for states to exercise this kind of power over federal elections. But I think the point here is it's a political play. So if the Supreme Court does what most people believe will happen and rejects all of these, eventually it's wasting time, it's sucking oxygen out of the election landscape, and it will muddy him up a little bit, where to a certain swath of the electorate, he will probably just be a little bit too much to vote for. And I think that's the play why you're going to expect to see this in multiple states.
I want to move on now to something else that's gone viral. Trans actress Tommy Dorfman, who stars in hit series 13 Reasons Why, is also a good friend of Dylan Mulvaney. Well, she flipped out at a New York airport last week when a Delta Airlines employee threatened to kick her out after she complained that she had been misgendered. Have a look.
While he's talking, you're talking.
You just misgendered me again.
Okay.
Multiple times.
Gotcha.
Both of you have.
Sorry. Wasn't intentional, but if you want to take it personal, that's also.
Well, she did do it intentionally twice.
You're talking to me too.
You said she and then you said he.
You're being condescending, and if you want to continue, I have Port Authority escort you out the building right this moment if you want to play that game.
Louise, he said it wasn't intentional. And I think that employee is being very polite and respectful. Just get on your flight, honestly.
Yes, well, exactly. This is, I suspect, another situation of looking to be offended, hunting for something to, misgendering in this case, waiting for there to be a problem, on edge, looking for it. And I mean, when we boil it down to what Tommy is requiring here, he's wanting people to play along with his bastardisation of language and to compel the speech of other people. And we don't know whether the misgendering there was accidental or not, but the truth is that Tommy is looking for offence and looking to compel the speech of others, which is something I certainly don't go along with.
Look, I mean, I tend to agree with Louise, Kosher, because, I mean, it's confusing as well with the names. Like her name is Tommy. Look, I've just misgendered unintentionally. The other one's name I mentioned before, Dylan. It's confusing for people, and it just feels like sometimes people are out to get a gotcha moment.
For sure. I think there's definitely the free speech aspect that Louise mentioned, which is spot on. There's also something about just the culture we live in right now in the era of social media. There's so many different ways to get fame and virality for video clips. And, I wouldn't be surprised if there's an angle there too, where you try to stir up something just so that you can promote yourself. I'll just say, as a longtime New Yorker, that employee was just speaking New York to him.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to love that New York attitude. Okay, Louise Elliott and Kosher Gada, thank you for your time. After the break, we'll deep dive into the new royal documentary, plus alarming statistics about youth gender care. That's next. Let's head over to the UK now, where GB News host Patrick Christys joins me from London. It's great to have you on the show. Look, there's a new royal documentary which has depicted King Charles as a loving, doting grandfather to William and Kate's 3 children. Patrick, what we don't see is apparently his horribly strained relationship with his grandkids, Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet.
Yes, absolutely. They are notable by their omission there. This was all about softening the King's image, and it did a really good job of it. It showed several really tender moments with George, Charlotte, Louis, and of course William and Kate as well. But what was a real standout was the complete lack of mention about Harry, about Meghan, and about their children. And it follows a recent article in which the King is said to be very, very upset that he hasn't got any kind of relationship with Harry's children, with his grandchildren on that side of the family. And most people over here in the UK are saying, look, Harry, it's one thing if you want to take out your personal grievances and air your dirty laundry in public and trash the country and trash the royal family. We don't like that. But it's another thing to deny your own children a wonderful relationship with the royal family. And I think going forward, that's something that Harry is going to find very, very difficult to explain to his children when they see about how wonderful that really could have been. And I think it really does kind of put the kibosh up this idea as well that King Charles is some kind of distant individual who had a terribly strained relationship with his kids. You see the way he's interacting there, and you just think he comes across like a lovable grandfather, and it really is a shame for Harry's children.
Yeah, I mean, when you take the king and the royal titles out of it, at the end of the day, they're stopping a grandfather seeing their grandchildren. It seems cruel. But look, let's go to something else, because there's no shortage of things around for us to chat about. It seems the BBC might be doing a Disney. That's a verb now, apparently, doing a Disney after they were criticised for their woke adaptation of Agatha Christie's classic Murder is Easy. Patrick, I know this one has hit a nerve with you. Do you care to explain?
Look, the reason why it's hit a nerve is because it's the latest in a long line of incredibly woke stuff to come out of the BBC. So this is an adaptation of Murder is Easy. The director wanted to include, for some reason, West African colonial themes and wanted to emphasise the empire and all the bad things about it. It's not that there is now a black lead character, that doesn't really matter at all, but it's the kind of fact that you need to have this undercurrent of empire and colonialism and negativity. But it speaks more to something at the BBC. Doctor Who recently, they misgendered an alien in that show, and that made news. What? They had a black Isaac Newton. Kids' TV shows are teaching children about critical race theory. Their lead sports presenter, Gary Lineker, accusing the government of being like 1930s Germany for wanting to push back on illegal immigration. Presenters accusing Israel of genocide. It's impossible, I think, now to get a show commissioned at the BBC unless you happen to be indicating something about an ethnic minority, disabled member of the LGBT community. And that does great on people.
Yeah, and don't we all want to watch those shows endlessly? It was revealed yesterday that more than 70 children aged between 3 and 4 have been sent to the controversial NHS transgender clinic. Now, Patrick, this has caused extreme concern amongst health officials, and rightly so, you'd have to say. Is there no minimum age for these patients? I mean, I have a 3-year-old about to turn 4, and I don't understand how anyone could say, yeah.
No, there's no minimum age. They're thinking of introducing a minimum age of 7, which I think most people would also regard as absolutely ridiculous. 70 children under the age of 3 and 4, 140 under 4s, and about 169 under 5s were referred to a transgender clinic here in the UK. What we're seeing is activist groups referring these kids to things like therapy, etc. I would argue some of those therapists probably need therapy themselves. Schools are lapping this up. Our National Health Service is lapping it up. Some people are saying it's akin to child abuse, frankly. I think a lot of this now comes from the parents, where there's maybe a bit of Munchausen by proxy going on here, and they're seeing that their kids are special. But what is going to happen, and you're getting testimony now of people who went through some of these clinics when they were young and who are now adults and who now regret it. What I think we're going to get is a tidal wave of lawsuits down the road from people who feel, I'm just quoting one victim now, as though they were mutilated as part of an experiment. And really, that should be stopped. Adults are supposed to protect children, not try to mutilate and adultify kids in this way.
Yeah, and we're hearing so many more of those lawsuits, especially in the UK, coming out. So I think you're spot on there. Now, your Prime Minister released a somewhat odd Christmas video on X or Twitter this year, where some say he took a swipe at Prince Harry. Have a look.
Number 10 press office. Harry, you've got the wrong number.
Is this all a bit of fun, or do you think it's a real snub?
No, I think it could well be about Prince Harry. In reality, we have a tremendously successful journalist over here called Harry Cole, who has written numerous stories about the Prime Minister, including one in relation to his own personal phone number. And I think that that's what that was about. What I will say is
doesn't translate quite across this far away. I think most people here wouldn't have known that.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. It is quite a light-hearted video, though, from our Prime Minister, who's been under the cosh over a variety of different things. He does definitely have a human side. There are the usual types saying, how did he have time to film that video? Shouldn't he be running the country? But, you know, it is Christmas after all. But no, I think our Prime Minister would not be taking such an obvious swipe at Prince Harry, because Harry would probably sue him, wouldn't he?
Well, I was just going to say, I think Harry can get off the phone to his lawyers now that you've explained it. Patrick Christie's, thank you so much for your time. And thank you for your company tonight. The Bolt Report is up next with James McPherson, and you'll see me here again, right here in Credlin tomorrow night at 6.